Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to dive into the mind of an emperor.
Always up for a little time travel, especially when it involves philosophy.
Today we're tackling Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, stoic philosopher, all-around fascinating figure.
Definitely a unique combination, not your average emperor, that's for sure.
You've got excerpts from his personal writings, meditations, plus that insightful introduction to guide us. We're on a mission to uncover what made Aurelius tick, what shaped his thoughts. What do you say we jump right in?
Sounds good to me. Let's unravel this emperor-philosopher paradox.
Exactly, because let's be honest, the whole emperor-philosopher thing is inherently cool, right? It's not every day you find a world leader who chills out by pondering, virtue and the meaning of life.
It's a rare breed, for sure. And Aurelius wasn't someone who sought out power. In fact, becoming emperor wasn't even part of his original game plan.
Oh, really? So how did he end up ruling the Roman Empire if he didn't even, apply for the job?
It's a bit of a long story, but essentially he got there through a series of adoptions and some unexpected turns of fate. Imagine going from philosophy enthusiast to ruler of the most powerful empire on earth. Talk about a career change.
Talk about a plot twist. Okay, so picture this. It's around 160 AD. Rome is a whirlwind of gladiator battles, political intrigue, and in the middle of it all, you have Marcus Aurelius jotting down his thoughts on how to be a better man.
And not just any man, but the emperor himself. I think that's what makes meditation so fascinating. It's not just some detached philosophical treatise. It's the personal reflections of a guy wrestling with immense power and responsibility, trying to figure out how to live a good life amidst all the chaos.
And to navigate that chaos, he turned to Stoicism, right? That seems to be the philosophy that really resonated with him.
Absolutely. The introduction to Meditations makes it pretty clear that Stoicism had a huge impact on Aurelius.
But it also mentions that he drew inspiration from a whole bunch of other thinkers, too.
Oh, for sure. Aurelius was exposed to a whole smorgasbord of philosophical and intellectual traditions. Don't forget, his education was basically designed to prepare him for a life in Roman politics, which, believe it or not, involved a hefty dose of philosophy.
Wait, seriously? Like Conquer Gaul 101 and Intro to Stoicism all in the same semester.
Pretty much. And don't forget about the heroic exercises. Those were a trip.
Heroic exercises. Okay, you've got to elaborate on that one. What exactly were they talking about? Like philosophical push-ups?
Think of it as a mashup of grueling workouts and intense philosophical debates. They were designed to instill the classic virtues of a Roman leader, resilience, self-control, a willingness to face whatever the world threw at them.
Wow, intense. It sounds like Aurelius was practically raised to embrace a life of civic duty and philosophical inquiry. No pressure, right?
Not at all. Only the fate of the Roman Empire resting on your shoulders. But you hit the nail on the head. It was in this pressure cooker environment that Stoicism really took root and flourished. Remember, this was a philosophy that emphasized virtue, reason, serving something greater than yourself, ideals that resonated like crazy with the Roman elite, especially those at the top of the food chain.
Makes sense. If you're going to rule an empire, it helps to have a solid philosophical framework to, well, keep things from falling apart. So Stoicism was like the official philosophy of Roman emperors, or what?
It was definitely popular in those circles, that's for sure. Remember those heroic exercises? Stoicism fit right in with that whole mindset, discipline, virtue, service. It was practically woven in the fabric of Roman leadership.
But reading through the introduction to Meditations, it sounds like Marcus Aurelius was drawing inspiration from all over the place, not just the Stoics. He was no philosophical one-trick pony.
You got it. Aurelius wasn't the type to limit himself. The introduction really highlights this about him. He was drawing wisdom from a variety of sources, which tells us something really important about how he viewed philosophy.
Oh, like what?
He didn't see it as a rigid set of rules or doctrines like follow these steps and achieve philosophical enlightenment. Instead, imagine it more as a toolbox. He picked and chose what worked for him, creating his own unique approach to, living a better life.
I like that philosophical toolbox. So who else made it into Aurelius's inner circle of philosophical gurus besides the Stoics?
Well, one name that might surprise you is Epictetus.
Epictetus as in, wait a minute, wasn't he a former slave?
That's the one.
Whoa, that's kind of mind-blowing. You've got the Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, finding wisdom in the teachings of, a former slave. That's incredible.
It really goes to show you the power of ideas, right? Social status, background, none of that mattered to Aurelius. He saw value in Epictetus's teachings, especially his emphasis on focusing on what you can control, your own thoughts, your own actions. And this wasn't just some abstract idea for Aurelius. He took it to heart, constantly reminding himself of it in meditations.
Talk about walking the walk. Okay, if we're talking philosophical influences, we've got to mention Socrates. And I'm not just talking about his ideas, but the man himself. His life, his trial, his whole "I'd rather die than betray my principles" thing. That's a powerful story, even for an emperor.
Absolutely. Socrates was the ultimate role model of staying true to your philosophy, even when the going got tough. And believe me, as emperor, things could get very tough for Aurelius. So, having that example of unwavering conviction, even in the face of death, I think that meant a lot to him.
It's like having a philosophical superhero on your side, right? Okay, last but not least, we got to talk about Heraclitus, Mr. Everything is in flux. You know that famous line, no man ever steps in the same river twice? It's like deep thoughts with a side of existential crisis.
Huh. Yeah, Heraclitus definitely had a way of making you question everything. But think about it. Aurelius was living in a world that was constantly changing, right? He's got the weight of an empire on his shoulders, and along comes Heraclitus, reminding him that impermanence is the only constant. It's enough to give anyone an existential crisis.
It's like he's searching for those philosophical anchors in a world where everything feels like it's, well, up for grabs. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about meditations itself. Now, the introduction describes it as a patchwork, not some meticulously organized, systematic philosophical treatise. It's more like a philosophical scrapbook.
And that's part of what makes it so intriguing. Meditations wasn't intended for us to read. It wasn't some grand philosophical statement to the world. It was Aurelius's personal journal, a place for him to work through his thoughts and emotions.
So we're getting this raw, unfiltered glimpse into the mind of an emperor.
Exactly. And the fact that it's not structured like a typical philosophical text, that just adds to its impact. It makes Aurelius's thoughts feel immediate, relatable, even after all these centuries.
It's like eavesdropping on a conversation with him.
Right. And it raises an interesting question that scholars are still debating. Was meditations intended for an audience or just for himself?
Well, whoever he was writing for, there's something about his voice in these writings that feels incredibly direct and personal. It's almost as if he's speaking right to us, across the centuries, sharing his struggles and insights.
And that's the beauty of meditations. It goes beyond its historical context and taps into something fundamental about what it means to be human. But let's talk about Aurelius himself for a minute. What glimpses into his personality can we find in these writings? Because there's got to be more to him than just the stoic emperor stereotype, right?
It's easy to get caught up in the whole emperor thing with Aurelius, the power, the responsibility, all of that. But what strikes me about meditations is how relatable he is.
It's true. It's not just some high-minded philosophical treatise, is it? It feels much more personal than that.
Exactly. Like he's writing about things we've all felt, the anxieties, the self-doubt, the whole what's it all about kind of thing.
And he's not afraid to be vulnerable either. He admits to struggling, to having doubts.
It's kind of refreshing, actually. It reminds you that even an emperor, maybe especially an emperor, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders.
For sure. It definitely humanizes him. And I think that's a big part of why meditation still resonates with people today. It's not just about some ancient emperor's wisdom. It's about one man's attempt to navigate life's challenges and find some meaning along the way.
And that's something we can all relate to, right? We might not be ruling empires, but we all face challenges and uncertainties.
Absolutely. And what's cool is that Aurelius shows us that we can turn to philosophy for guidance and support, even when things get tough.
Yeah, and not just philosophy in a theoretical ivory tower kind of way. Aurelius actually tried to embody those Stoic principles, virtue, self-control, service in his own life, which, let's be honest, couldn't have been easy.
Right. Trying to live up to those ideals while also dealing with, political rivals and barbarian invasions. That's a tall order.
Talk about a high-pressure job. But, even with all that going on, he still found time to appreciate the simpler things. Remember his fondness for using imagery from nature?
Oh, absolutely. The olive groves, the changing seasons. It's like a breath of fresh air in the middle of all that serious philosophy.
Right. It's a good reminder for all of us to maybe slow down and appreciate the world around us a bit more.
Couldn't agree more. But there's one last thing about Aurelius that I wanted to circle back to. The introduction mentions that he personally believed in the gods and in divine intervention.
Yeah, it kind of surprised me when I read that. I mean, isn't Stoicism all about logic and reason? You wouldn't think divine intervention would be their go-to explanation for things.
It's definitely an interesting wrinkle. but I think it shows that even within a system of thought like Stoicism, there's still room for individual belief. For Aurelius, it seems like his belief in the gods was intertwined with his understanding of the Stoic idea of logos, this rational order of the cosmos.
So kind of like a divine plan, maybe?
Exactly. And while we might not all share that belief, it's a good reminder that these historical figures were complex individuals with their own unique worldviews.
Totally. Just goes to show you, you can't always put people in neat little boxes, can you? Well, on that note, as you continue your own deep dive into meditations, I want you to consider this. What is it about Aurelius's words that speak to people across centuries? Is it the timeless wisdom he offers? Or is it something more the sense that we're listening to a fellow human being grapple with life's big questions? A reminder that we're not alone in our struggles, even if we're not ruling an empire. Food for thought, right? And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of Marcus Aurelius. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those philosophical conversations going.